So the first part you read is kind of like a young man's coming of age kind of story, and then it seems to take a sharp turn. So how much, in terms of the coming of age stuff, is like from your own experience?
Well, the general outline. I mean, my general experience was, you know, I'm from a small town, and I had the same general experience. Lots of people. It's from the general experience. My feeling was that, I mean, I'm a science fiction writer. I've written 8 or 10 science fiction novels, and but like many others, I went through the 60s, through the whole complex of stuff, and I always resisted writing about it. I thought everybody knew how that turned out, so why not write something else? And then a few years ago, I thought, well, if you're a science fiction writer, you can change how things turn out. And so I sort of I decided to write a novel that sort of took, it's pretty generic, I mean, it has its particularities, but it's the arc that a lot of people went through, you know, not only here in this country, but if you look back through history in England or France, any young man that wanted to be a writer had to go to London, or he had to go to Paris, he had to go to New York, and you know, so it's sort of a Bildungsroman in that sense with some of the particularities of the period.
But why write the coming of age story now? I feel like for a lot of authors that's sort of the first book you write.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm a little slow. Oh, that's a good question. It just seemed, well, actually, I wrote that book, but it never got published. And it's lost. I wrote, the first book I wrote was an actual buildings. That's the term, right? Bildungsroman, is that how you say it, Les?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Right.
Well, isn't it Bildungsroman where, yeah, I guess that's a coming of age.
Yeah.
Romantic story, yeah.
You know, it's Bright Lights, Big City. It's,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
And I wrote that book when I was like 22 or 23, living in Louisville. And then actually it inspired me. And I got an agent, and it looked like it was gonna get published, and I moved to New York, and it changed my life even though it never got published. And none of that story's in here, but my own actual story is that book never got published, but I got jobs, and I worked like for romance magazines and Western. I got work as a hack writer in publishing and stuff, and had a lot of fun. It was nice, and I got to be part of the thing. And then at a certain point, in about 66 or 67, this big wind blew through New York and blew a lot of people out to the communes in the Southwest or into SDS, or, you know, and so I sort of quit that for a long time. And I went back to writing when I was like almost 40, and then was a science fiction writer for 25 or 30 years, and then we decided to write this. That's a long answer to a short question.
You've written other alternative histories.
I did. Yeah, this book is actually an alternative history, although I was watching The Wash, and I didn't get to a whole lot of that, but it has it's an alternate history, and I'll give away this much. The key on it is that Kennedy's actually not killed. So he returns. He's almost killed, but he comes back and appears at the Democratic Convention in '68 and gets the nomination. And this leads to a great deal of conflict. And actually, I stole that scene from Philip Roth. Plot Against America, where he has Lindbergh. People know this book, right? Lindbergh gets the nomination. And the interesting thing to me was Roth didn't know, he'd never heard of an alternative history. He thought he'd made it all up. He didn't realize that it's a sort of a subgenre of science fiction ever since Phil K. Dick and lots of other writers, had used that same. But it hadn't been used a lot out of science fiction. It's overused, I think, in science fiction these days. It's almost a genre within a genre. But yes, I wrote a previous alternate history about the Civil War, in which John Brown's raid succeeds, and there's a whole guerrilla warfare in the South, and there's an independent black nation in the South, and stuff like that happens. That's the only two that I've written. That one and this one. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. Like I say, well, that's it. That's how it's done. I tried to write this book sort of leaving out, and it's kind of weird reading sections because the book itself is written sort of without the connective tissue, and it's problematic how to do it orally. I've been reading this book by Walter Ong. There's a book called Orality and Literacy, and this is by a scholar. And he talks about how it took like 300 or 400 years in Europe, but when you go from, when you actually go from an oral culture to a print culture, words change from something that only exists. A word only exists when it's gone, when it's already gone. You only, you say it, and it's gone, and all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but over a period of time, words become objects. They become things. They have a permanence, and that's what literacy, and then to a greater degree, print culture did in Europe, and has done really throughout the world. And this book is very much embedded in print culture. Words as stationary. I mean, all books are in a way, but I think without thinking about it, I try to do more of that in this book, where the words are things, where the lobe of the narrative is left out. It's like a movie. It's like a film strip where you cut out 8 frames and use 2, and you cut out 8 and use 2. So that's mixing metaphors. But anyway, that's sort of the way it's done.
It feels like that gives it an immediacy, though. Like when I read it, that sort of impressionistic, it just felt very immediate and almost as if it was written in the present tense. Almost as if that was an oral tradition then.
Well, that's the idea, yeah.
So thank you so much, Terry.
Well, thank you all for